pay homage to these great souls and brave warriors. Thank you. So welcome everyone to this webinar. We have lined up the best speakers who will share their knowledge and experience with us. We can look forward to 2 hours of great learning from these great minds. MART did a reality check at the ground level by talking to many farmers from different states. The findings of the study will provide a background for the presentations and discussions to follow. So may I now? Okay, then I'll just set the context in the meanwhile, just in 5 minutes, yeah? Yeah. So before inviting the eminent speakers to share their thoughts, I'd just like to establish the context so that we are discussing within that framework. And I had put together 6 questions which have bothered me for the last 30 years. Because whenever we talk of agriculture, we are back to the same questions. Question number 1, from independence till now, if you average out the GDP of agriculture and industry, in the initial years, the GDP for agriculture was very high, which has come down dramatically as a share of the total GDP, and the industry has gone up. But average over the last 70 years is 20% each for both the sectors. And yet, the public investment in industry over the 70-year period is 10 times more in industry than agriculture. And this is evident from the industrial estates, the SEZs, the ports. So a lot of heavy investment have been made in industry. But when it comes to agriculture, we don't even have proper storage facilities of grain after 70 years, and we keep hearing stories about grain rotting and being stored out in the open. And then, of course, 25% of our fruits and vegetables go waste at the farm gate because we don't have proper cold storages or cold chains or whatever it takes to keep them useful. So the question is, why the stepmotherly treatment to agriculture? That is my question number 1. Question number 2 is, we have CII, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, IMA, and so many other industry bodies, which are the voice platforms of these of industry. There is no equivalent body for farmers over the 70 years. Why? Question number 3, government employees get regular increases in DA as per Gender Pay Commission recommendations. Private sector takes pride in boasting double-digit increments and better perks. But when modest increases are announced in MSP of crops, armchair intellectuals and others start sounding alarm bells of food inflation, and this country won't be able to afford the inflation. So why this discrimination? Question number 4 is, agriculture is the only sector where government decides how the produce can be sold, to whom it can be sold, and at what price. This is, to my mind, ridiculous. There are no such restrictions on goods and services in the industry and services sectors. So why this discrimination? Question number 5, India and China both have 10% each of the world's arable land and similar population. We produce 300 million tons of food grain. China produces 600 million tons of food grain. Why? Finally, raw material for our roti, kapda and makan comes from rural, nothing comes from urban. But we are not grateful to farmers even for our survival. Why? So let us now focus on the recently announced monumental reforms in the agricultural sector. Much delayed, but there are drostai. They offer hope of a brighter future for the farmers. But many questions arise in my mind, and I have 3 of them or 4 of them here. The first is, will the states implement the reforms wholeheartedly, or will politics prevail like it happened with the model APMC? Question number 2, will the 1 lakh crore infra development fund actually transferred into productive assets this time? Question number 3, will our productivity levels come close to China in the next 5 years? Question number 4, will farmers' income double over the specified 5-year period, which I think ends in 2022? So since Mr. Swine is not here, may I invite Mr. Sivakumar from ITC to share his views over the next 10 minutes. I just have one question to Shiv before you start your presentation. Shiv, as we all know, you are the creator of eChopal, which has helped increase procurement of agri products at better prices for the farmer. ITC has, of course, gained, but the farmer has gained. My question to you is, when will the turnover of ITC IBD exceed the turnover of your tobacco division? After all, food is more important than cigarettes. Thank you.
Thank you. So, if the question is pretty focused on when will the food and agri turnover exceed thereabout tobacco business, obviously both are growing businesses. Food and agri is growing at a much faster pace. But interestingly, in India, notwithstanding the concerns you may have on cigarette consumption, you know, the BD consumption in India is 80% of all tobacco, and cigarettes is 14%. Within that, the legal cigarettes is only 12%.
Yeah.
And so that distortion is because of the taxation and other policies which are there. And therefore, there is a, in some sense, as consumers shift to better forms of tobacco consumption, so long as they're desirous of consuming it, and which also means a higher value addition for the farmers, it's by itself also a potential sunrise industry, and therefore that will also grow. But very clearly the growth rates of food and agri, and tobacco also is also agri, and mind you, the farmers who grow tobacco literally have no other option, the kind of land and the soil and the rainfall that they have. But yes, the trajectory of food and agri will be on a much faster kind of a pace.
Great. I'm happy.
So,
you can now
proceed with your presentation sooner than later. But let me get into the broader aspects of the question that you had on the Indian agriculture and farmers and reforms, and in that context, what we can aspire for. And on top of all of that, we also now have the overlay of COVID, and we haven't got a chance to hear Pankaj on his findings. But let me share what are some of the disruptions caused by the COVID, and what are some of the underlying trends in agriculture which got further accentuated during this period. and how reforms actually potentially address some of these challenges. And in that context, what would businesses like us intend doing, and therefore look for a hopeful future for the farmers and our agriculture sector. So that broadly is what I'll cover, and I'll be brief without necessarily elaborating every one of these points in the 10 minutes that I have. I want to point out 4 COVID impacts. The first is the demand disruption that happened in India as elsewhere in the world. Obviously, all the out-of-home consumption has come to a standstill. And obviously, food suffered as a major consumption item outside homes. And if you look at the implications of that, you only have to look at the falling prices of things like milk, because all the chai, coffee shops outside homes, which are major consumers, the sweet shops, so all of them had to discontinue operations. So whatever increase in consumption that happened at homes, obviously won't match up with the food service consumption outside. Yeah. And milk is only an illustration, and many other products would be had their own similar kind of challenges. The second kind of disruption is to do with the supply chain disruption, that you had transportation not functioning, and for some period the markets were not operating. As a result, there was a much larger immediate impact on perishables. I mean, you had crops like fruits and vegetables which are about to be sold in March and April, obviously had a higher impact of prices. I mean, relatively, grains had less of an impact. Wheat was the biggest crop that is harvested and sold at this point of time, and government had come in and bought more than usual quantities already, and that really supported the market. And then government had also quickly, in many places, some of the APMC reform that happened in states like MP and UP, and these states helped, and we could expand our own direct procurement centers, and as did a few other players, and consequently, at least the grain movement was not as bad as the perishable that got impacted. The third kind of an impact is to do with the farming operations itself. There's obviously some movement of labor that happened, and we also had some impact because of the rains that occurred at that period, and as a result, the harvesting of multiple locations got bunched up, and therefore availability of machinery and labor became a challenge in some areas, and consequently even the farming operations also got disrupted. This is what happened within India, and of course similar kind of agri economies elsewhere. But as it is relevant for India, when we look at the larger global situation, there is 2 angles. So one is the similar kind of a consumption demand disruption. One, obviously there is out-of-home consumption implication there also. But more interestingly, 2 other features. The meat consumption has significantly dropped because of the concerns on the health elsewhere in the world. And as a result, the grain consumption that goes as feed into meat had its implication. Then we had significantly lower biofuel consumption because all transportation came to a standstill in many places, and there's a proportion of biofuel which goes into fuel. And as a result, you had dropping prices globally also for certain commodities. And the other angle is globally the geopolitical dimensions, where now countries think we must be self-sufficient for food. We don't know when the global supply chains get disrupted. And consequently, there is many economies looking for how do I source diversify my origins. And this is an area that India can plug in pretty well in certain grains, in fruits and vegetables, and processed food, and so on. So these are all the kind of impacts that one had seen. Then there are 2 other trends which are otherwise quite substantial, already happening, and got somewhat more accentuated during this period. One is to do with the consumption trends. The concern for food safety was already high, and that continues, and therefore consumers looking for the food which they can be safe when they're buying and consuming, and therefore the implications of traceability and so on. And what really got also added during this period in a similar way is the biosecurity of food, because a lot of people are concerned. One, of course, as far as this virus is concerned, it got transmitted through people. But what could get transmitted through food is another concern, and biosecurity is another area which is gaining attention. Now, everybody is again concerned about immunity, and therefore what kind of immunity boosting food that we should really consume, and therefore demand for certain kinds of foods and certain kind of medicinal and aromatic plants. Some of that we are seeing huge hike, demand for packaged food, demand for trusted trademarks. So some of these kinds of things are on the consumption front, which got accentuated. Now, on the supply side, I won't say accentuated because of the COVID, but generally we had the serious implications of the climate change and depleting natural resources. I briefly talked about harvesting getting bunched up. It is because also unseasonal rains that happen in a couple of states around the time of harvest. So rains in summers and very warm winters and bunched up rains, extreme weather episodes, all of these on account of climate change and depleting natural resources like water and topsoil, as it is have an implication on agriculture, the productivity and the sustainability of agriculture. So this is also something that we must keep at the back of our minds. So what does all of this mean for very many questions that Pradeep had raised at a broader level and got further accentuated because of COVID just now? The first thing which will happen is that the shifts of cropping patterns will be far more dynamic and demand driven. So with the level of fall in prices for certain kind of commodities and not as much fall or some increase for something else, obviously means what is likely to be in demand tomorrow needs to be understood by the farmers, and as dynamically the planting decisions get taken. Internationally, that is quite common, but in India, typically the planting decisions are on the base of last season's prices, not on the base of what price I might get when I harvest my crop, which is why you see huge volatility in our crop prices. And at the time of planting, farmer sees something is fetching 50 rupees a kilo. By the time you harvest, you end up at 10 rupees a kilo. And so that is not uncommon in many perishable crops. And therefore, we need to be far more demand-driven and far more dynamic. While demand-driven is always the need, far more dynamic. The second is the continuing needs of social distancing and precaution that one needs to take. And migrant labor, not everybody would return and find some income generating livelihood opportunities back in their homes where they went. Also mean that the farm mechanization is going to get accelerated, and therefore how well are we ready and how we are customized to our own context is the other implication of farm mechanization, and I'm sure Mr. Saha will touch upon some of these when he comes to talk. And resource conserving is absolutely critical given the climate change I talked about and the depleting natural resource. And precision farming, part of mechanization, has implications here also. But precision farming in terms of understanding the other dynamics of weather forecasts and potential pest attacks and all of that, and then how do I do that becomes an issue. Now, it is exactly in this transition that we are looking at that the reforms that have just been announced and the funds for infrastructure that you also touched upon become absolutely relevant. So far in the conventional APMC system, the transaction between a farmer and a buyer, whether it is a trader or a processor or a retailer, whoever it could be, was one of transactional based. That whoever is the best bidder at that point of time gets the produce and takes away, which was a better system over what was prevailing 50 years ago when this model was conceived. But today, you need to see as to how the demand signals need to reach the farmer, and more accentuated because of the COVID situation and the dynamic changes, as well as how the appropriate varieties that are in demand which need to get produced. How do you ensure that the productivity and quality and the variety get aligned with what the market wants, which requires a far deeper engagement between the farmer and the rest of the value chain participants. Now, when the transaction-based system that was prevailing until date, which was appropriate for an era at a point of time, that is something now which is enabled by the new laws that are now put in place through the ordinances we talked about. The Trade and Commerce Facilitation Act, essentially now anything outside of APMC, engagement between the farmers and the downstream participants can happen without any more restrictions. Now, you had a question whether states will now get aligned, whether implementation will happen. I'm more optimistic today for two reasons. One, because it is not changing APMC, but it is saying we will coexist this along with APMC. That means systems will compete with each other rather than saying that I'll change what was happening. So, which is a brilliant workaround that the government has found, and therefore that is one prospect. The second, in those states which have already reformed their APMC in the more recent weeks after the new Model Act was announced a year ago, they have already segregated the role of the regulator and the operator of mandis. Until now, for the previous 20 years, the operator of the mandis, which is the MD of the mandi board or whoever was the respective authority, was also the regulator for licenses being issued under APMC to private participants. Now, there's a conflict of interest which is natural. And now this got segregated as part of that APMC reform some states have done. And this also augurs well in terms of how this will be allowed to operate. One has to, of course, see as to how this actually will translate into the ground, but I'm far more optimistic to respond to that question in terms of whether it will get implemented. The second is the opportunity to create, using the same trade area concept outside APMCs, to put up electronic marketplaces. Now, the reason why electronic marketplaces are important, in addition to the kind of initiative that the government has already taken, like ENAM, which is linking up all the APMCs and now over time is also extending to other logistics and assayers and other private participants and evolves as a broader platform. Now, the private marketplaces that we set up, like eChopal, you talked about today being the 20th anniversary, and I'm happy to be participating in this event today and also talk about eChopal 4.0, where that enables, in addition to just as a marketing platform, precisely what I described a little earlier in terms of how the demand signals flow in on a real-time basis to the farmers, how the production conditions in the form of weather forecasts and disease prediction and the whole farm conditions in terms of soil and all of that, how technology enables for facilitating precision farming, and from the third side, bringing in Uberized services for mechanization that I talked about. So now all of this enables farming as a service to the farmer. The farming per se remains in the hands of our small farmers who have demonstrated their entrepreneurial ability to produce and compete, literally with their both arms tied behind them with the resources they have. But now with this combination enabled by the new ordinance, the forces will get combined, that the farming as a service support through the models like eChopal 4.0 and many other companies have their own models which will probably now flourish because of the new ordinance, will bring all of this in terms of the demand side as well as the supply side and the operation side to be able to link up. The ordinance, the Essential Commodities Act amendment that removes the sword which is hanging on any of these kind of investments in the past that we don't know when it will get invoked. That's an exemption now given to the value chain participants. So announcing that simultaneously is again a very important piece of legislation that gives us confidence. And under the Trade Act, removal of the market cess for all the operations also now makes the investments more viable. Earlier, we had our model operating now for 20 years, but we make investments in the infrastructure. On top of that, we also pay the market cess. I mean, obviously, then your viability comes under a lot of pressure. So now that is also being taken off by the government. And through the third piece of legislation, which is the farming agreement ordinance, Now it defines the ways in which we can collaborate with the farmers, ways in which the potential disputes can get resolved. And hopefully as this gets implemented, we'll have mechanisms that will help in this kind of collaboration. So in that sense, responding to all your questions together, I see a more optimistic future for multiplying farmer incomes and expanding the share of agriculture, and actually make this not as a business of drudgery for the farmers with no reward despite all the risk and the drudgery, but as a knowledge-based business in partnership with the value chain participants so that the consumers get served. As to why many of the questions that you had in the beginning that we still have this kind of situation is because of the way the government had tried to balance the consumer interest with the farmer interest. And now that very balancing is where the business opportunity now lies, which got opened up with these reforms. And therefore, I certainly see them as landmark reforms. And then we are certainly game to do our bit in meeting the expectations of the farmers and the consumers and the government, because that's a business opportunity, and an enlightened self-interest will do all that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shiv. You've given us a very good, holistic, exhaustive picture of agriculture the way you think it's going to unfold. So I'm sure there'll be many questions for you, which we'll take up at the end of the presentations. Okay. And here I'd now like to welcome Mr. Swain, who's joined us. Mr. Swain, for one, your image is not very clear. It's still a little dark.
Still dark.
And we want you to come right in the forefront so that we can all see. Yeah. So, for everybody's benefit, Mr. Swain is the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, and he's been driving the new agenda. So, Mr. Swain, each speaker will be allotted 10 minutes to make your opening remarks. And thereafter, after all the speakers have made their presentations, then we will take up all the questions which will be addressed to individual panelists. So at that time, you will get some time to address some of these concerns. So since you joined late, I just had 3 or 4 questions for you, and then you could go around adding to what you want to say. The first is around, all the questions are around the reforms. So the first is that, will all states now accept these reforms, and we will not see politics happening where, even the Model APMC Act the last time was not implemented by all the states. Question number 2 is, will the 1 lakh crore infra fund be effectively utilized to really create world-class infrastructure? The third is, will our productivity levels come close to China in the next few years? Because today, on the same land, we produce 300 million tons food grain, and they produce about 600 million tons. And fourth, of course, is the question which everybody asks the Prime Minister, that will the farmers' income double over that specified 5-year period? So we therefore, so these are the questions. And let me share that we all know that governments are run by joint secretaries. Okay, so you are right now sitting at the forefront, and you are the leader to bring about these reforms. And we are all followers. So we are all going to follow where you tell us to go. But I personally believe that we are sitting at a point where you could be creating history, and we could get some reflected glory from that. So over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Pradeep Kashyap Saab. It's been wonderful introduction to the subject that you gave. I missed the first part of it because probably technology sometimes get a corona scare, and probably today the Zoom technology got a corona scare. I tried my best. Never mind. It's the 4 questions that you have asked probably looks like 10 minutes will be less, but I'll try to compress in 10 minutes time. As you know, when it comes to the farmer, the sky is the limit. I think Sivkumar Saab already has laid out that canvas before me. I could hear him from the last part, but I could imagine that he's talking about this, that the sky is the limit. Yeah. And thank you for saying this, Pradeep Saab. In fact, first, let me start with Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. Because if you remember that context that our great leader Shastriji had said,
oh, yes.
Today is very much important in the time of COVID. Our Jawan, salutation to our Jawans who are actually in the border, yes, safeguarding us from the marauding forces. And it is the Kisan which is helping us on the ground to survive and to grow. So that is how today the economic front, the agriculture has been a big propeller in terms of all the 3 sectors of economy. Let me just give a brief overview of what we have done in the ministry. In fact, by 24/7, when it started, all from 25th of March, when the lockdown started, national lockdown started. So if you remember that, everything got closed, whether it is transport came to a halt, and all the sectors related to that, whether it is the hotel industry or the tourism or even restaurant, or even talk about the industry, because there is a need of social distancing and there is a huge migration of labor. Industry got closed and all sectors are affected. And at that point of time, remember, we are just about the corner of the harvest, the Rabi harvest. And so we have a biggest challenge before us, what to do. In another 15 days, we had to do the harvest of wheat, otherwise there is to be. So given that, if you remember, on 25th of March, we started opening the markets which got closed, wholesale markets, which today, of course, I just heard Sivkumar Saab talking about the APMC. 2,580, nearly 80 APMCs are there, which are principal market yards. They got closed because of the lockdown. So we had to open them gradually with that social distancing and sanitization drive that we had to do. And by around 5th of April, we are able to do about more than 1,000 markets opened up. And the critical markets which are there in India, we could open up. We worked 24/7. We got them open with all the precautions, because otherwise the market could be the main epicenter of the corona. And at the same time, we realized that the fruits and vegetable sector was the first in the hit list. So we thought, let's first open up the fruit and vegetable sector, because the grain sector harvest is still around 15 days late. So believe me, we started setting up immediately the control centers all over the states, all around India. And we ensured that all the trucks carrying fruits and vegetables moved through India non-stop. And it was the first sector we got it open. When the transport sector was affected, it was me and my team working round the clock with the state bodies to move the trucks of fruits and vegetables across India. And then we took it on us, the distribution in the big cities. We marked all the cities, even if distribution was not a work. We brought in the FPOs, we brought in the cooperatives, we brought in all the channels we could do to activate, to reach to the mohallas, the different areas of the town, to distribute the fruits and vegetables. That was the first thing we did around that. While doing so, we realized we opened up 1 year, by around mid of April, we are almost comfortably 1,600 markets we are opened up, and it was the point of harvest. And at that time, when the migration, we realized that already before 25th of March, already many of the skilled laborers had moved out. Markets were affected. So, however, when we started the market, we did a little bit of innovations with that Enginarega to ensure that the markets run. And while doing it, we realized we did a two-pronged strategy. The states which are depending on the labor force for the harvesting, there the mechanization was the key mantra for us. So like Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, MP, the combined harvesters were really used in large number, more than even the previous year, to offset that labor migration. But in the states where the laborers came back, it was a boon for us, because there the agriculture sector used, like the COVID, if you look at the entire world, the COVID started with these urban centers, particularly around the transport hubs. Yeah. And they are particularly also the industrial hubs, whether you call it Wuhan, you call it New York, you call it Los Angeles. These are all around the urban centers, the industrial that it happened. But when you look at the rural areas, because by virtue of their wide-spaced locations, spatial locations, there is a social distancing already amongst the village clusters. That was a saving grace that the God has given to the rural sector.
Yes.
And like in 2008, that the rural economy came into the rescue, that when there was a great Lehman Brothers meltdown in 2008, Indian economy resilience was there in the forefront because of the MG-Narega and other rural economy. If you see that today also, we saw the similarity when the rural area came to the fore, and this harvest, we did an excellent harvest this year, more than the last year. Despite all the problems that the world is talking about, we could manage this in April, and we, beyond even the social distancing norm of the market, we took up various places like playfield, schools, and other things to have the procurement and also ensure that the market, the entire harvest and the procurement goes simultaneously side by side. So that is why we gave a buffer to the farmer very clearly on the market space, and a lot of planning was done. While doing it, as you know, COVID is one which is contagion when you are close contact. But the digital economy, digital system creates that social distancing very naturally. And that is why today the web, Zoom, etc. have flourished. In agriculture sector, realizing that we gave it a big push in the digital sector also. Like if you remember, there was a big thing I worked around ENAM, which I was driving. Then I started expanding the ENAM. On the contrary, from 585 markets that was covered under ENAM, I brought it to 1,000 within a month's time. Very clearly, we worked through all the hardship to do that, so that the markets, the natural social distancing can be there. One more social distancing we use by coming out with the APO module out of the APMC, so that the APOs can trade from their collection centers. So while doing it, we realized that there is a need for bringing transport to the farmers, the traders alike. So he also launched the Kisan Rath app. You must have heard about. I worked on about 15 days and launched that Kisan Rath app. We have more than about 8 lakh transport system on that app today, including quite a large sizable number of tractors, which is helping the farmers to bring their produce to the market or anywhere, wherever they want to take it.
Correct.
So Kisan Rath was a big innovation we did on that front and technologically. While doing it, we realized that we need to really bring in, Sivakumar Saab will agree, the direct marketing was the major requirement for this. In fact, while, of course, Mr. Subhabrata Saha is here, so the technology space, the machinery space, I think it got a huge boost, technology space. I think that today, not only harvester, but even the tractor, I'm told by my colleague, Gen Secretary Marketing, Machinery and Technology, the tractor sale is now really picking up. It is unforeseen, basically. So towards the mechanization, there is a drive. Agriculture is moving more towards the mechanization today.
Yes, absolutely.
So the productivity is the question that you have raised. So the productivity will naturally come from 2 or 3 factors. One is that, of course, Sivakumar Saha has spoken about the precision farming, the seed, good quality seed, the timely applications of input, and good credit, use of machinery technology for both sowing and as well as for harvesting. So those are the things which are there, and a good extension machinery. You'll be happy to know Ministry of Agriculture is working around all these fronts together to ensure that today, whether it is called input, whether it is credit, whether it is insurance, PMFBY, whether it is KCC, whether it is infrastructure, all are focused by the Ministry of Agriculture together. Wonderful. It is not only single drive that we are undertaking. Okay. So that is why we are now moving very fast, and this 1 lakh crore package that we have given, we'll see that from FPO to cooperatives to individual entrepreneurs, what you spoke about the warehouses, processing, because what India today requires, because we have 2 basic targets before us. When we are talking about doubling of farmers' income, that's a very important thing, because at the end of it, the Agriculture Ministry looks at the farmers' income, to the farmers' income.
Absolutely.
The other is creating a market ecosystem. If you see, we have got 3 market ecosystem in the domestic front. One is the APMC that Sivakumar Saha spoke about. Second is the procurement that the government does directly at a MSP, that the PSS system. Third, of course, we have the village heart system. village hearts which are near to which are the retail markets. There are 22,000 markets which are there. Unlike the APMC, which are wholesale and regulated, these retail markets are at the village level, where we actually do that. Other than this, one market which is important, which India needs to open up, is the export market.
Yeah.
Because India has a very ambitious plan of doubling the export by 2022 from $30 billion to about $60 billion. So we need to really, we are working on it. In fact, we are having a huge kind of strategy session on this. We are looking at Middle East, we are looking at ASEAN region, we are looking at Europe, Western Europe, we are looking at also USA, Canada. We are identifying the commodities, the clusters, the value processing. Processing is a major challenge for us because processing industries need to be propped up at this moment to cater to the global market and even to the domestic market. And processing in India is still not at par with that of France or Thailand. If you look at Thailand and Malaysia, we are looking at that area to do it. Some of the areas in the agriculture primary sector has really moved out in the COVID. Some of the processing sector also we are now looking like dairy processing, because the restaurants and tourism, it is slowly picking it up. So we are looking at that event that it gets a kind of boost. So now when you are opening up the market, looking at the export possibility. In fact, this year also, if you see agriculture in terms of quarter four growth, if you have a look at the quarter four growth, agriculture has a better growth this year than it was last year. If you see last year during this quarter four, it was 1.6%. This time it is about 5.9%. Quarter four means that January, March quarter I am talking about, the agriculture. Whereas the industry had a negative growth, and service sector had a reduced growth, not a negative, but definitely a positive growth, a reduced growth. Agriculture definitely moved ahead than the last year. So definitely, if you are looking at agriculture shows the way, definitely agriculture is showing the way among the three sectors of economy. And so like service sector was 8.7% and now it is 4.4%, I'm told, in the last quarter. So definitely if you look at agriculture is way ahead of other two sectors in terms of growth now. So given this, we want to open the domestic market also. So that is where I have brought it to ordinances, because farmer needs more, dil mange more. So definitely we need to give them more. So that is why we have opened up an ecosystem whereby the marketing, because whatever you may produce, unless market gives a remunerative prices, the farmer's zeal, enthusiasm to produce will not match with that. So the productivity and everything will depend on how much market is compensating the farmer. So that is why what we have done is, because India is one of the largest producer of the food grains, number 2 producer, fruits and vegetables, number 2 producer. If you see many of the commodities, you are number one producer in the world. Call it banana, call it milk, and so many things. But then question is, we need to, India is also biggest consumer, pulses also number 1, but you have the biggest consumer also.
Yeah.
We need
Spencer, you have more than answered the 4 questions I had raised. So can I request that we get the other speakers also, because we are managing this time, and we'll come back to you.
Sure.
There are already many questions addressed to you. So we will be asking those questions once the presentations are completed. So is that okay?
Thank you, absolutely.
Thank you very much. That was, I now believe that you will create history, and we are with you. Okay, so Sahasab, now my request to the 3 speakers who still have to present is that it's already 5 o'clock and we have time up to 6 o'clock. And in addition to the 3 presenters, we also have the study report. So if we can be a little brief and perhaps take 7 to 8 minutes. So Pankaj, what I will do is that I will request you to come in after Mr. Saha, because we are talking a lot about mechanization, and also this would be the right time for him.
Sure.
So Sahasab, I have a very simple question to you, that India now produces more horticulture products than agriculture, primary agriculture. It's now 320 million tons versus 290 odd million tons. And we have never concentrated on fruits and vegetables in the past in terms of mechanization. So you look at other countries where they have, different kinds of equipment for sowing, for growing, for harvesting, for plucking. So what are your plans? How are you going to help the country get more mechanized in agriculture?
Thanks, Mr. Kashyap. I think it's an interesting question. And I have to say this, that manufacturers, which also includes us, are in that domain in trying to provide a comprehensive solution for farmers in this space. It's not just about mechanization, it's about a bunch of things that we need to do to make sure that the throughput, specifically in the area of horticulture, improves substantially. And since we belong to this domain of mechanization, we have made sure that our tractors are so designed to be able to fulfill the requirement of farmers. For example, whether it's in the area of grapes, whether in the area of vegetables, whether it's in the area of orchards and vineyards and so on and so forth. So clearly we have our act there. The second aspect is what kind of implements will help us to be able to drive that. Remember this, that India is relatively more tractorized and much less mechanized in a sense.
Absolutely.
So there is a significant opportunity in that space. And when I was referring to the context of playing comprehensive role, I think earlier Mr. Shiv Kumar also alluded to the context of precision farming. We believe that some of the areas of weather, the area of precision agriculture, hyperspectral imaging, all of these put together will play a very significant role in making sure that the grading of our fruits and vegetables that Mr. Swain alluded to be able to export will also stand very good in times to come. Let me very quickly jump over to the context of mechanization in a sense. Some of us will know this, that the Indian farm equipment market, which is consisting of tractors and implements, is currently estimated to be about 13 billion, which is about only 7% of the global market. And it is estimated to grow at about 6 to 8% to reach about 18 billion by 2025. The overall mechanization of the Indian farm stands at only about 40% compared to 80% plus rates in some of the major economies. And this has also been alluded to by my two esteemed speakers prior. The US is at about 97%, the Western Europe at 95%, and China is only at about 48%, despite the significant yield difference between India and China that you spoke about. And tractors dominate the Indian farm mechanization market, accounting for 80-85% of the same, and only 10 to 15% share of the rest is contributed by the farm equipment like rotavators, threshers, and harvesters, etc. Now, to understand how the industry will cater to the demand of mechanization, which is only bound to rise, we need to understand how this demand is likely to get created for tractor and farm machinery, both in the short as well as in the long run. And to talk about first, let me just very quickly talk about the short run and what will be the demand drivers for the short run. I call it the Holy Trinity. And the reason I call it the Holy Trinity is that there are three parts to it. One is, what is the current sentiment like? What is the real income of farmers? And hope. So let me first talk about current sentiment. It is determined by the likelihood of increase or decrease in crop production. Depends upon rainfall deviation from the long period average, reservoir level, and progress of sowing. The long-range forecast for 2020 southwest monsoons, as all of you are aware of, is predicted to be normal at about 102% of the long-period average. The important thing is that the spatial and temporal distribution is also likely to be evenly distributed, and this makes it even more important. I think it's made a strong start this year, and in the first fortnight, we've received 31% excess rainfall. If you look at it in terms of the reservoirs, they continue to be on the upside, which augurs well for production growth. At the end of May 20, we are sitting at 34%, which is much higher than the 10-year average of 20% by this period. On the sowing front, we know that Kharif sowing is up 13% YOY till last week, higher declared MSPs in an indication that agriculture sector has largely escaped the impact of COVID. So if I look at all of these facets, you can imagine that the current sentiment of farmers is buoyant. So that completes the first part of my Holy Trinity. The second part is that the variable is called real income, which is a reflection of the current cash in hand of farmers and is again a function of the price of crops, which has been spoken about a little earlier, the MG-Narega wages, the quantity of output, agri-credit, and cost of inputs. Now, if you look at it, the increase in MSP for 14 Kharif crops is about 4% from the previous year. The recommended, based on the recommended MSP, the production target for F21, the revenue is expected to be about 6% higher. Mr. Swine alluded to it. Fourth quarter F20, the GDP was only about 3.1%, and that was slowest YOY growth in any quarter in the last 11 years.
Yeah.
Having said that, agriculture gross value add remained a bright spot, registering a growth of 6% YOY in Q4 F20 compared to 2% YOY witnessed in Q4 F19. And this has reflected through an improving trend in price realization. Price level of agri inputs on the lower side will also support farming as the Kharif season starts. Development activity in rural has also started to pick up as degrowth in road construction under PMGSY and employment generated under the NREGA moderates. Remember this, that the total rural income is a function of farm income and non-farm income.
Yeah.
So the NREGA allocation for FY21 is also hiked substantially. The average wages also increased substantially by about 11% on a per day basis. So if you look at it, the second leg of the Holy Trinity, the farm terms of trade have turned favorable in F20 as growth in input prices slowed and the growth in output prices improved sharply, leading to better income. And that in these two factors are very critical in this whole space. Let me now speak about the final vertex, which is about the Holy Trinity. Mr. Swine has alluded in his address how the agri sector has acted as a growth engine in reviving the economy thus far for whatever it is worth. It is estimated the agri sector alone, and this is just an estimation, will add another 0.5% to the overall economy. You know, amidst this whole circle of gloom and doom, agriculture and allied activities have provided a beacon of hope, and on the back of 3.7% increase in food grade production, which is a new record. The strong assurance from better expected monsoon, 40-60% higher water availability, 46% higher offtake of fertilizer during the first 2 months of the financial year are signs of an impending bumper production this year going forward. Added to it, robust sale of seeds. And in fact, we've been seeing that the quality of seeds being procured by farmers has also improved. And high food prices show a better term of trade and more encouragement to the farmers to produce. Overall, agriculture and allied services is serving as a ray of hope in the middle of the corona crisis. Having said that, you know, farmers typically have been living on hope for a better crop output, a better price realization, and oftentimes, you know, it doesn't work that way. Hence, the government initiatives to improve the probability of success through various initiatives that have been taken, and most of it, of course, will have medium to long-term impact, will be watched very carefully. I believe that this shifting of the needle of the three legs of the Holy Trinity to create that golden quadrilateral, which I hope will have a substantially higher probability of success. And this, this needle shifting from the context of hope to a far greater probability of success is something that will be extremely important. Now, some of the initiatives like the PM Kisan scheme, the interest subvention scheme, and the additional credit through KCC and NABARD are important in this direction. I think at a strategic level, we've been speaking about it, and let me once again, for the sake of repetition though, but unleashed three crucial and long pending reforms in the Essential Commodities Act, APMC, the Farmers Agreement on Price Assurance through Contract Farming, etc. And I could believe that this could be one of the most important, powerful elements of fueling farm mechanization and aiding farm mechanization in the future. So if I look at how does the long-term demand story, I spoke a little bit about the short, and what we speak is also important from a long-term perspective. If you look at it today, the factory industry sales are about 40,000 crores vis-a-vis the implement sale, which is only about 7,000 crores, and it's substantially lower than the global market of $85 billion. The mechanization levels in the country are only about 1.5 HP per hectare, vis-a-vis 8 to 10 HP per hectare in developed countries and 2 to 4 HP per hectare in developing economies. And the declining farm labor offers potential for steady long-term growth. I think contribution to GDP is high for developing nations like India. Mechanization rate is amongst the lowest due to high percentage of small and medium farmers in the country who cannot afford the farm machinery. We believe in this domain, aggregation opportunities will play an important role. To improve farm income, productivity per inch of farmland will have to increase significantly, will lead to faster penetration of farm mechanization as a measure to adopt better agriculture practice, along with digital technologies and the advent of precision farming. I think apart from this, the government has formed policies to aid mechanization through subsidies and custom hiring centers. Under the submission for agriculture mechanization, already 5.5 lakhs of agriculture machinery and over 4,200 CHCs have been established. I think looking into all of these factors, I can confidently say that the long-term story of mechanization is intact. Having said that, I think during the COVID period, of course, availability of machines in the right quantity and right time had become a challenge. Very happy that the government acted extremely proactively, and thanks to Mr. Swine and his team for doing a wonderful job in this direction. I think the industry was able to open up, the farmers were able to do the job, especially at a time when Rabi harvest was right in the thick of it when the lockdown happened. And we were able to open up our plants, our dealers to provide service in the locations where the farmers needed them most. I think was very important. Having said that, I think in the shorter term, we are seeing some challenges in terms of availability of labor and the plants and our suppliers to be able to operate at full capacity. The good news, as Mr. Swine also referred to, is that there is an upsurge in demand for tractors. I think we must understand that the application of tractor today is primarily in land preparation in the country. We are witnessing, and we will witness this shift going forward, hopefully, in terms of the usage of the tractor as the plant grows or the crop is harvested. I think the industry is slated to see an inflection point in the near future with the application of specific farm machinery, which will be able to impact farm productivity and farmers' lives. And you spoke specifically also in the question as to how do we improve mechanization in the horticulture space. I think all of us are in the thick of it. Industry will focus on crop-specific machines as a trend, such as the ones used for potato farming. Rice transplanters, I think, have become a big upsurge suddenly because of the shortage of labor. I think India will become the sweet spot for farm machinery growth apart from tractors. We are proud to be part of this growth journey, which not only has implications for organizations such as ours, but also for the improvement of the overall economy. Thanks.
Thank you very much for a very crisp, focused, and a presentation full of hope. So I'm very happy. And of course, there'll be questions to you later, hopefully.
Sure, thanks.
Pankaj, your turn now, since we have to ration time to cover everybody's presentation and take some questions. So may I request that you finish or try and finish your presentation in 10 minutes. And at the end of 9 minutes, I will request you so that you realize that you're running out of time. Yeah, so just quickly run through the thing. Yeah, you're mute. Unmute. Unmute. Mute.
Pankaj, you are on mute.
Yeah.
Pankaj, you're on mute, Pankaj.
Am I audible now? Hello?
Yeah. Now it's okay. You're on mute. Come now, start. Yeah.
Can you see the screen now?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just, sorry for the technical glitch. I will just skip these slides because I think Mr. Swine and Mr. Sahe has already covered the background part of it.
You come to your findings.
Yeah. So I'll directly go to the finding as we know that agriculture seems to be the bright spot at this moment amidst the corona. And what questions we went with in the market to understand that whether agriculture will become the savior for the economy, and to understand that we have met farmers across 4 states, UP, Odisha, Maharashtra and Karnataka. And we purposely covered food grain and vegetable farmers to understand the perishability aspect of this corona impact. And we covered these 230 farmers across these states through telephonic interviews. So we'll try to understand the basic background of these farmers. So majority of these farmers were into the food grains and vegetables which have been covered, and also we purposely took the coverage of the land holding. So both very small and medium level farmers have been covered across 3 land holdings. And many of them were also into the allied activities with the livestock and other poultry and dairy activities. So what we see in terms of tractorization, which Mr. Saha also referred, that this farmer profile, majority of them, in fact, all of them were the users of tractor, and less than half of them were also owning the tractors. And PM Kisan has become the savior in this Corona period for the farmers. Almost all the farmers who interacted admitted, a majority of the farmers admitted that they have received the even this fund during the Corona times, and that has been really a quite savior apart from KCC and other schemes that you highlighted here. As far as the impact is concerned, the Rabi production of the crop has not been impacted much, so almost 70%. As far as the production is concerned, 70% farmers told that they are either got the same crop or they got the better crop this year. Only few cases where both in the grains and vegetables, because of the bad weather and some reasons, some people have suffered the some crop loss, tuned to 10 to 20%. And as far as the operations are concerned, when we ask the question that what operations got impacted, so what came around that majority of them were reported some kind of problem they faced during Corona, but it was mostly around the harvesting problems because of the non-availability of the labor and also the non-availability of machines on time, and many times operators also has become a reason for the harvesting problem. Apart from that, some farmers also face the land preparation issues for the next crop, in which the availability of the tractor and was one of the major issues pointed out by the farmers. When we try to understand how many farmers actually got impacted because of these two major issues, so almost half of the farmers reported that labor shortage and higher tractor rentals were the key pain points for them during the Corona period. Although you can see the graph that especially the out-migrated states like Karnataka and Maharashtra, from where the migrants came back to UP and Odisha or the other states, they have faced more problems in terms of the labor shortage. And that is also those states where the rise of the labor rates have been reported. And also importantly, the rentals, because of the diesel rates and some other reasons, the tractor rentals have also marginally gone up, and 50% farmers also face the problem of getting the tractor on rental basis. One key question which we covered regarding selling of the produce, we found that almost half of the farmers told that they have got all the produce sold in the market, and it is primarily the vegetable farmers. If you look at the other half, it is the vegetable farmers, primarily small farmers, who have reported that they could not sell the complete crop. There was a partial selling that they have done. And only very small percentage, only 4% farmers told that they could not sell anything. So you can see that the majority of the farmers are saying that it has been a selling situation for them. And when we ask them about the problems faced in marketing or selling, so majority of the farmers, 6 out of 10 farmers told that they had some problem while selling the crop. And it was primarily the transportation in case of food grains and partial selling in case of vegetables. Because of the high perishability, they were not having sufficient storage and to protect the crop. So that was one reason that 6 out of 10 farmers could sell partially their vegetable crops. And majority of them, as pointed by Mr. Swine also, apart from mandis, many farmers went to the local haats, and in many cases the vegetable farmers use the street vendors and mobile vendors in the villages and small towns to directly sell their produce from their farm to the customers. So rather than going to the mandi, because mandi was closed for some period, they went to these places for selling the crop so that they could minimize the losses during that period. Now coming to the post-COVID impact on the corona. So what we see that during the corona, when we ask the question about the next crop, the majority of the farmers have gone for the next year of plantation, next season of plantation, and even the fund is not the issue for them. So majority of these farmers are either using the fund which they received from the last crop, because Many of them got the instant money because they have gone to the government center, sold the crop, food grains and other things. So the fund was not coming as a major issue for majority of them. Only very small percentage are reporting that they have gone to informal loans compared to the last savings and the KCC. Also, when we ask this question about what kind of problems they are anticipating for the next crop, so 22% farmers are anticipating that availability of the labor could be the issue because of the current situation of COVID. And otherwise, there are not major issues pointed out. Almost more than 50% farmers are saying that they are not going to foresee any problem. So the sentiments are very positive with the next crop and with the funds availability as well. Now coming to the key question that how they are seeing the next year to unfold. So what you can see on the left hand side that majority of the farmers, almost more than 90% farmers are saying that either they will be getting a better crop or a similar production in the coming year. So on the back of good monsoon and better reservoirs as pointed out by Mr. Saha also, the farmer sentiments are quite positive in terms of the next year crop production. And also when we ask about the reasons from the farmers, so the better monsoons and the government support, which was very important to note, that more than 50% farmers are saying so, that government support has been one very positive reason for this positive sentiments coming from the farmers. And also some farmers are expecting better price in the coming year. One important critical question in the wake of the government announcement of the Corona package, COVID package that we have asked, that what kind of schemes and things have really supported you during this COVID period. So majority of farmer, as pointed out by Mr. Swine and Mr. Saha also, that PM Kisan has come as a great savior for the farmers, and that is on the top for the farmers because majority of them reported getting that money. So that has really been a very, very positive drive for the farmers to plan their next cropping. And also they got the choice to sell outside mandi. So with the implementation of the programs and the schemes, that they have the liberty to get a better price realization, selling the crop to private traders and companies for a better earnings. So that is going to be a key driver for them. And critical question on mechanization, when we asked them what came, that majority of the farmers are visualizing that their mechanization will grow. So that's a very good news for the industry, that mechanization is going to be a driving factor for the farmers, and more so in the states where the deficiency has happened. So if you look at the Karnataka and Maharashtra, where high majority of farmers are expecting an increase in mechanization. So this is a golden opportunity for the industry to tap this opportunity, tap it in terms of providing better equipments and also filling those gaps where the mechanization is still not progressed much, be it beyond land preparation, what could be the other avenues, and also for the horticulture crops. So the last slide I'm coming to, that when we ask about that how the consumption is going to be, how was your consumption during the Corona period? So majority of the farmers, unlike the urban counterparts, have said here that their consumption has not decreased. So majority of them, almost 70%, more than 70% are saying that either their consumption has remained same or it has increased. 33% saying in fact it has gone up because they are sitting at home, they are consuming more of food and other things. So the grocery consumption and on many things that they are saying that it is not on the downward side, but on the upside. Only few categories like the travel and personal care products, where we could see that some kind of drop has come in terms of the consumption during the COVID period. So on the whole,
one minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I said you need.
Sure. Yes, sir. I have only 1 minute to go. Yeah. So what we see, as rightly pointed out, that the key indicators like the V-shaped growth of fertilizer sales as well as tractor sales, which has leveled to the last year corresponding sale, it is a very good indicator and good sign of recovery for the agriculture sector. And on the back of predicted normal monsoon, better reservoir level and increase in the sown area, as already discussed, are going to be the key drivers for the farm economy in the coming year. So finally, what I say that with the support of various government schemes, especially the schemes mentioned here, the PM Kisan, deferment of KCC and increase in MSP, they have really helped farmer to go for timely cultivation with monetary support, better price realization and more farm income. And they are visualizing that there will be shrinkage of middleman influence and there will be more avenues for selling for the farmers in the coming year. Apart from this, other schemes mentioned here, like the reforms in the APMC and other things, are definitely going to help the industry to grow the ecosystem and take the farming economy forward. So finally, to sum up, what we are concluding that high agriculture growth prospects will lead to the impressive growth in mechanization in the coming years. Government's focus towards agriculture and farming will prove to be the catalyst for the rural growth, and all the first and second factors will actually lead to the agriculture growth, resilient agriculture growth, which was unimpacted due to COVID. It will make the economy more stronger, and the farm economy is going to be the driver for the overall economy in the coming years. So that's all from my side.
Well, thank you very much, Pankaj. You manage your time very well. And I think this presentation needs to be studied at leisure because there is a lot of useful information in it. I understand, Pankaj, this will be circulated to all the participants?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So all the participants will get a copy and they can then study it in detail at leisure. So we still have two more learned speakers who will share their views. So may I now invite Mr. Vijay Sahu, and Vijay bhai, 7 to 8 minutes if you can, try and say your piece.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kashyap. So actually, I came here to learn from the policymakers, from the industry experts, and from you all consultants and researchers. My experience is very practical experience. I grew up as a very small child. I had been to village and I went there after 50 years. When I went there, I saw very different things, like no more farmers' children want to do farming. So they are all migrant laborers in the cities and towns. And the farmers, those who are doing farming, most of the land is actually just not being cultivated because the landowners live in the city and the farmer in our village doesn't want to cultivate more than 1 acre, 2 acres, whatever he needs for himself. So when you understood the economics of that, I actually worked with a tenant farmer just to compute. Recently, we did a trust home in the village to help the farmers. So we saw actually every tenant farmer in our village loses 5,000 rupees per acre after he pays to the landlord for the part of the land share. And if he does a Rabi crop, he loses 2,000 to 3,000 rupees. These are actually small farmers. They do 1 or 2 acres. So I said, why do you lose? Then I figured it out. Actually, they use more inputs than required. They use actually sometimes for the harvester, somebody will come from Punjab with a harvester. The driver is from Punjab and he will do the harvesting. Every agri equipment actually came from almost like from outside, and the villagers rented, paid, and if you compute and the fertilizer etc. they used, everything you add up, actually they are losing money. So that one aspect at the micro level, every expert actually has to go to the ground and see why the farmers' children are migrant workers. The second is, when I joined Reliance, after few reviews, one of my friends asked, what is that you found difference in Reliance of all your previous jobs? I have been here 15 years. So I said, I get a spirit that the founder chairman has developed a philosophy. What is good for India is good for Reliance. Focus on the need of India and the Reliance will be taken care of. And whenever I hear our chairman, I get the exactly similar kind of inspiration that what is good for India is good for Reliance. So let's see what is India's need. And every crisis we found, like in 2008 Lehman Brothers, that period, and now the need of the people and the need-based industries, they actually support the whole economy. So agriculture supported then, that was growing 2-3%. It is supporting now. I met actually many of the experts here during that period, 15 years ago, when we were setting it up to learn. I was not knowing anything. We are the largest food retailer today in the country, and we need to do more. We are actually starting again to take it to the new level, given our experience in the COVID time, because we are the largest supplier connecting farmer to the consumer in places where the consumer was actually not getting even the fruits and vegetables. We have become one of the biggest suppliers. The other aspect I wanted to talk about is the migrant workers. When this lockdown happened, you found 16 crores people in this country are actually migrant workers. They're all farmers' children. 4 crores of them, in one way or other, data differ, but actually they went back home. And then when they went back home, they actually don't know farming and they don't have skills for farming. Nearly, we figured it out, 30% of them actually they want to come back. This is at my personal level. I did some work with IIT Bhubaneswar, with some IIT Bombay experts. And we researched and found out, that's the time actually I met Mr. Kashyap and his team. So we found out like 30% of the people of this, they want to immediately come back because there is no livelihood in the village. The other 30% think after 6 months they will think. And the remaining 25 to 30%, they don't want to come back at all. So actually that is an insight. Probably all policy makers, all those who think well of India, well of the country, have to reimagine how to handle those people who do not have traditional farming skills, but still they want to stay in the village. So that is actually the second aspect I want to live with. So the other thing I actually noticed, I was thinking India's, like the farm size is small, that's why the productivity is low. I just looked around the data, I figured it out. China, it is even smaller than ours in terms of average land holding. But that productivity, like Mr. Kashyap was giving overall macro data, it is 2 to 3 times something like that in terms of the productivity. Even Israel is on a per capita basis much smaller. And I figured it out, our land cost actually is the highest. So I did actually one math and figured it out. In US, if you buy agricultural land, per acre is $3,000. And in India, in 2013, it was actually something like 5 lakhs. And today it must have increased to something like $10,000. So the farmer who has to do the farming, he has a choice to sell his land, keep the money in the bank, get higher yield as against losing money. And if you see on the productivity he gets is much lower. So that aspect we need to think, how will this situation happen? How will the farmer will get productivity? One set of people are not able to use their land because the tenant farmer is refusing to use the land because he is losing money. So this needs a complete comprehensive thinking at the government level, industry level, and all these expert level. I leave these thoughts with all of you. But as far as I personally am concerned, we are putting people back to work with IIT Bhubaneswar. We have mapped something like 1.2 million people by now with the skills. At my personal level with IIT Bhubaneswar, I'm encouraging a team and they're trying to place them back. But who remain, we thought we'll partner with MART because they teach people the livelihood skills, but it needs comprehensive, very deep thinking by all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sahu. Thank you, Samek, for being so patient and being the last speaker. You're the one who sits on all the money. So, and farmers need credit, so especially small farmers. So what are your views on how you can help the small and marginal farmers? And of course, your own thoughts on anything else that you'd like to share in the next 7 to 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kashyap, and I'm actually enlightened with the speakers before me who really have stayed the stage, and it makes my job a little tough as well as easy, both. Having saying that, I think it's a very interesting discourse we are having in terms of where does agriculture takes us. I think there's a very optimistic scenario as Mr. Sikumar discussed, because the decades fight for the agriculture reforms have finally come through, including the Essential Commodity Act, which has opened up the markets to a lot of extent. The reforms will be very, very beneficial to the farmers in many ways. But I would like to bring us back to a little bit of realism by saying that agriculture can do as much, because we need to look at some of the other elements that are very, very critical factor for agriculture development. And these are related to somewhat what Mr. Sau touched upon, is on the land, on the labor markets, on the credit, which you asked me to specifically focus on. I will also add to it the safety nets we have for small and marginal farmers, landless who work on farmlands, and also the nature of the subsidy structure we have still in the agriculture sector. So if I take land, I think land is a very important issue that has to be brought to the forefront, because we have 25,000 lakh hectares still fallow lands. And these are lands which are within the domain of agriculture department. It's not in revenue, not in any other kind of department hold. So how do we structure that to make sure the land tenancy, the land leasing process, the act has to be followed through in various state and also the national level. Although Niti Aayog has already given a model land leasing act, but it has not been able to implement. And without looking at land, I don't think we'll be doing a lot of change in the income of farmers going forward, because it is again linked to your credit, is again linked to your safety net programs and whatnot. So that's the first critical factor. And we have 141 million marginal farmers who don't, with a 1.8 hectare, 1.08 hectare kind of a land holding size. So it doesn't make economic sense, as Mr. Sau was speaking about before me, because that's a critical factor. Second factor is, how will the labor market work in this current situation? We already have more than 60% people working on, around 60% people working on agriculture, and now we are bringing in more people because of the COVID disruption and lockdown, with a different skill set, and the labor overall structuring of labor in the rural markets will be very different to look at. So that is another area which needs a lot of research and understand to look at, basically. That's one. Coming to credit, I think agriculture credit has been stagnant since 1995. So if you look at since 1951, agriculture credit grew up, and after 95, it's more and been stagnant around 65%. Irrespective of so many various schemes and various financial inclusion programs the government has run through, it has not picked up. And there are various reasons, and one of the biggest reason has been the collateral factors of our credit system, and that is not helping again related plans. Having said that, I think one other factor that I strongly believe in is how our credit structure is currently structured. We have credit for power, we have credit for we have subsidy for power, we have subsidy for credit, we have subsidy for irrigation, we have subsidy for interest submission, subsidy for loan waiver, and we need to look at it from a very holistic lens. We cannot take a peaceful approach to all these various kind of a subsidy structure within which agriculture is functioning. And we must not forget that these aspects are related to various relations in rural India, and it cannot be delinked from the political economic conversation. So it makes the challenge even more compounding together, like the other reforms we have done. So how do we bring about reforms on these aspects? Will be very critical. If you take the case of Punjab, where the nexus of power, crop, and water have given us very, very very, very negative results in terms of water consumption and the relation to price stabilization there with MSP and all that is a very critical area to look at. So I think subsidy structure is something we need to look at very, very predominantly as we move forward. On coming to direct benefit transfers, which basically is the core tool for inclusive agriculture growth, I would say. Basically, why I'm saying that, it basically, what does DBT mean for some people? It's about paying subsidies straight into the bank accounts of the beneficiary. And this is seen as one of the most promising pathways to enhance the efficiency of subsidy programs. And I'm not saying that subsidies are bad, but I'm saying that to make subsidy work better, we need to have a better DBT system. But unfortunately, the entire DBT system is based on a robust, reliable database and a state capacity to design and direct this targeted transfer into the farmers, into the beneficiary's hand. And when we come to that, then we realize that the definition of beneficiary, when you get into, and you say that definition of beneficiary is at the farmer operator level, then the complexities and other important policy implications comes in. And this is where I think, again, we need to look at how do we bring about the people who don't have proper documentation, don't have land records, don't have the wherewithals to prove that creditworthiness, so they get credit from the formal institutional mechanism, basically. But having said that, I think we need to also look at a long-standing issue of how do we bring in a agriculture credit policy. There has been a lot of discussion, but I don't think much has been moved on the agriculture credit policy. Many of our current discourse, you read in newspapers, blogs and all, is talking about India should look forward to a specific agriculture credit policy, and how does that function in the current scenario that is to be. We also looked up to other credit instruments like partial guarantee schemes, negotiable warehouse receipt financing, pledge financing, collateral financing agency kind of a gross kind of a model which can be scalable. So there are other ways of looking at how credit could be more fungible and more easy to be accessed by our farmers and all. But lastly, I want to reinforce that it is well known that sustainable increase in farmer income rests on the twin pillars of any growth process. And that is greater farm productivity and a dynamic non-farm sector. If you want to increase greater farm productivity, you need to have a dynamic non-farm sector. So, however, the structural transformation process is so uneven, and the stickiness of labor in the farm sector leads to farm incomes to substantially lag in non-farm incomes. So you have to compare these two very carefully. How far is our farm sector income vis-a-vis the non-farm sector incomes, how it will grow. So we need to think about agriculture growth, and agriculture growth is so the way we have seen a 5% growth in the last quarter, as mentioned. But going along in long term, we need to also look at service sector and manufacturing sector to bring the economy back to current stages before COVID or earlier than that. I will stop that because I think there is a lot to be thought about as at this point of time with the disruptions we are facing. That's all from me.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a number of questions, so I think we'll have time just for about 5 or 6, and maybe I'll try and at least ask one question each for all of you. So the first question is to Mr. Sivakumar. Shiv, this question is that, does India have a window of opportunity in the post-COVID situation, given the negative perception towards China, or will quality and prices still be paramount?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, quality and prices will be important, and all the efforts that we need to put together as the farmers and industry and the government should be able to improve that, and then we have an opportunity. Because long-term contract that we are now in the process of negotiating at the government level, as well as at an industry level, to, for example, look at Southeast Asia. Singapore, for example, relies entirely on imports for their food, and they have to source diversify. India stands a very good chance and meeting quality and the price requirement, we'll have an opportunity there. Middle East imports all their food largely. Africa is a good place. So I think a number of these locations, because of the Chinese situation and otherwise, will have an opportunity, but it can't be just that. Just because opportunity is there, we'll be able to win that.
Yeah.
We need to work on improving our backyard and then reach. And this is where both the reforms that were done as well as the gearing up of the industry to help the farmers in making it happen. I think that's when we'll have an opportunity.
Right. Thank you very much. Is Mr. Swine there? I can't.
Yes, yes.
Swine sir.
Right.
Okay. Acha Swine sir, now you mentioned about 22,000 village hearts and your scheme for village hearts. Is that right? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So in 1995, I had done a study for the Ministry of Rural Development, which was a path-breaking study on hearts in India. And in that, we found that there are 42,000 hearts in the country, which is as per the census of India. And in that report, I have talked about how small and marginal farmers come to these hearts to sell their not only vegetables, but even their grain, because the quantity is so small that there is no question of them going to the mandi. But these are unregulated markets, unlike your mandis, because of which they are not getting all the infrastructure and facilities at these hearts. So we had requested the Panchayati Raj to make available some funds for upgrading these hearts. Simple things like women sellers sit the whole day at the heart and there is no bush where they can go and ease themselves. Okay. Drinking water, bicycle stands. If you don't have a bicycle stand, everybody carries his bicycle into the heart and it crowds the place and makes it difficult to shop. So I will send you a copy of my report, and we are going back to 1995 and we are still there, because all you require is about 5 lakh rupees per heart to modernize it, to put up platforms so that their stuff doesn't get soiled, have a roof over their head so that they don't sit out in the open sun or the rain. So that was the first question. So I will leave that with you, and maybe you can answer that. And in the meanwhile, I'll just go across to Mr. Saha and I'll come back to you.
Okay.
So, Mr. Saha, everybody is very keen on mechanization. Okay. So the one question people are asking is, how will mechanization and other factors help us bridge the gap in productivity levels between India and China?
Yeah.
You had alluded to it in your talk earlier, but several people have asked that question, so I thought I will request you to dwell on that a little more.
Sure. I'll talk more about India and less about China in this context.
Yeah, okay.
So contextually, if you look at it, the largest proportion of our Indian farmers have land holdings which are small. And at Mahindra, our purpose is to democratize mechanization technologies to transform the lives of these small and medium landholder farmers.
Yeah.
And when we look at it, the context of democratization is about improving affordability and accessibility of the same. And this is about putting tractors. This is about putting farm implements. This is about creating the ecosystem by virtue of which individual farmers, communities for specific crops can get advisory, can get inputs, can get benefit of rental services, and can also get precision farming services. Now, all of this put together is a heady combination of farming as a service and availability of tractors and farm implements. Combined with it, we have the benefit internally of having Mahindra Finance to provide credit to such farmers spread across the country. So the whole ecosystem of being able to drive value for the farmer to reduce their input costs, whether by way of advisory solutions or otherwise, and the availability of credit, together with the availability of a bought out implement or a rental implement, all of this put together will be able to drive value for the farmer. Now, what does value mean in this case? The value means input costs being lower, advisory on the type of crop to be planted, improvement in productivity and yield through improved mechanization techniques. And this, combined with digital technologies such as telematics, etc., can provide powerful data, which will not be a one-time kind of a usage, but actually usage to use this as we go along across clusters of farmers, including individual farmers. Our belief is that if we start investing in this direction, which we are, it will certainly help individual farmers and their communities to improve the way they plant and the way they grow, the way they protect, and the way they harvest. If I look at a very simple example during these COVID times, there has been an upsurge in rice transplanters. Now that's purely because of the fact that paddy is a labor-intensive crop. Suddenly there is a demand. Now you cater to the demand either by way of people buying it or by way of making sure that you're able to educate the farmers to create the nursery and then use a transplanter to plant it efficiently. I'm very sure that the states that have picked it up and are moving in the direction and the farmers are taking benefit will see the advantage of mechanized traction, providing improved yield and productivity as we go forward. This comparison put together will help farmers to shift from their age-old practices to new practices, which will include the understanding of soil, which will include the understanding of practices and the shift of those practices, which will eventually lead to improved farmer incomes, and the gap between China and India can be hence bridged. We must understand this, that the context of climate is an important aspect. If we can get data centered around it and focus on that, through precision farming, we can actually reduce substantive quantity of fertilizer that goes waste, for example, through variable rate farming technologies. Now, all of this can be made applicable to different types of crops, including vegetables and other spaces that you talked about in the space of horticulture. We very strongly believe that we can be an important contributor in this aspect.
Right. Thank you very much, Sisa. I'll come back to Mr. Swen. Swen साहब, एक question है that, FPOs were started to procure larger quantities of food grain and also to improve the farmers' incomes, because collectively they could get a better price and all that. The question here is that whilst there are 6,000-7,000 FPOs for food grain and primary crops, there are hardly any FPOs for horticulture, despite the fact that the total output of horticulture is now more than agriculture or primary grain, food grains. So would you like to? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kashyap. It's been nice hearing all the questions. In fact, fantastic questions. Both, if you want me to answer both the questions, I'll answer.
Yes, both the questions. और आपके लिए तो बहुत सारे मेरे पास 30-40 सवाल हैं. I will send them to you.
Thank you, because it's nice that you are organizing this. First of all, let me congratulate you for organizing this kind of webinar. Though I would have dubbed it, but then because of the Mr. Ramesh Jana and Mr. Biswal, I just came in. Thanks to them, both of them also, because they persuaded me to come in. I'm in the middle of rulemaking of that ordinance that I'm doing. I'll have to finish it up this weekend. In the meantime,
we are very grateful, but you have enriched the whole discussion.
Thank you. And also, FPO, I've just submitted the guideline for the 10,000 scheme that I have created, taken the cabinet approval. So
Right.
you'll see within a week or 10 days, a new FPO scheme for 10,000 new FPOs to be formed, which I'll be driving also from the front. So that also will be seeing it. Rural Heart also, let me start from the Rural Heart. Before that, of course, much of the question that you had put, much of the things that Mr. Saumik Das addressed is a long-term thing, with due respect to Saumik Saab. In fact, India will be is addressing those issues. It's since the debate was around the COVID, agriculture showing this thing, I restricted myself to the COVID situation. But then certainly, Samiksha, we are already on the this thing. All these points that we have spoken about, these we are already on that. Probably in another debate will come on that. Now, coming to also what you have asked, Mr. Saha. That's very important because when it comes to the productivity, yes, like India, you have to no economic. I mean, no country has the similar economics like any other country. And I'll also say no country has the similar agriculture like any other country. Though agriculture and agroclimatic zone may be same in similar ways, because of the Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of this thing, Capricorn, or the equator. But then remember that it is a whole ecosystem, because it depends on land size, it depends on soil quality, it depends on input management, it depends on the mechanization, level of mechanization, it depends on weather conditions, and it depends on the credit facilities, risk leveraging, it depends on the market also. So the complex interplay of all this determines the productivity. Productivity is not just on one factor. And if you look at the productivity of Punjab, probably it challenges the productivity anywhere in the world. Within India, we have diverse productivity cutting across the region depending on the social ecosystem that they have been providing. If you look at the even paddy productivity of Punjab compared with the Egypt, which is the reference point, certainly there is a kind of comparison out there. If you also compare some of our fertile belt with the vegetable productions in China, because China is the number one in that, in some of the areas we have that productivity. Only question is that in other areas, India is a big country, we need to really harmonize all the ecosystem and bring them on par. That's a key question. Having said that, I'll come back to those first question of the rural hearts. In rural hearts, I am doing this survey because, the doubling of farmers' income first stated, when you are working on that document, we thought that let us also address that rural heart where the majority of small farmers, and particularly the women farmers, which you addressed yourself, we realized that the women farmers are not able to come to the APMC. So that means you have to have a gender equality, and also the vulnerable class of the farmers should be able to access the market without really going further from the farm gate. So that is where the rural hearts came in. And when we did a survey, we found around 22,900 rural hearts are existing. And we have been doing survey on the type of management they have, on the type of infrastructure they have, on the type of produce they are having, and the type of user charges they are having. As a questionnaire, I had given it to my people and they have done. We have almost done about 18,000 village art survey out of the 22,900 that we initially spotted with the help of the states. And you will be happy to know that, happy or otherwise, that they need infrastructure. They certainly need infrastructure. And we had categorized different types of infrastructure to see whether they exist in these hearts. So I'm not revealing those survey. Maybe I'll put it on the website once I finish up the survey.
And I will send you our study, because we have renovated about 100 hearts in different states.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So
I'll send that to you.
We worked with the Ministry of Rural Development because, nearly out of these 22,900 hearts, nearly 12,000 hearts are under the Panchayat control, whereas about little less than 11,000 hearts are in the private sector. Like in the West Bengal, it is Jamindar hearts.
Contractors
all that
hearts.
there. So these are there, and few are there under the APMCs. About 1,200 are under their APMCs. So what we have undertaken is the strategy that we are asking the APMC-led hearts, APMC to develop these hearts, and you'll be happy to know that UP has picked up 500 hearts out of his work. In 64 hearts are happening currently for development, upgradation of infrastructure. We are telling them about a dozen of infrastructure which are required, like your platform, the shade. I think you spoke about the shade. Shade is there. Then we are talking about the drainage system. We talk about the internal brickworking. We are talking about the drinking water. We are talking about the toilet for the women, toilet for the men separately. We are talking about the boundary fencing. We are talking about the bio pit wherever it is required, like fruits and vegetable hearts, wherever there are majority of this compostable wastages. So the bio pit will be there. Then we are talking about the parking. We are talking about the parking for the animals because they bring the bullock carts to that. And then the small storage, because storage is a very key element.
Yes. Because they can't sell goods, they have to leave it behind.
Behind.
Bulky goods.
Well, yes, absolutely.
Pottery and things like that. Yeah, you're very much.
So about a dozen of infrastructure. So I think you'll be happy to know this already UP is working in that model with the APMC. APMCs are working and 500 hearts they have identified to go, because you know the biggest challenge with these hearts I found is the land ownership. In the survey we found the land ownership is not really clear, and for bringing up an infrastructure for any investment, land title has to be clear. So that is where we are now trying to sort it out. It will take a little time, but we are sorting it out. Then we are working with the MORT in the MG Narega. There is a provision for development of village heart, and they are now working on about 11 items of infrastructure in the village hearts. And about 1200 hearts are ongoing work which is happening. 1200 hearts.
Great.
So in the Panchayat, basically the Panchayat side, I mean those 11,000 odd hearts which are there, they have undertaken that. So what we
good. Can we then move to the second question?
Second question, okay.
Which is the FPOs for horticulture.
To give a prop up, we have created an agri-market infrastructure fund, and already Andhra and Gujarat have applied for it for a fund. This thing for village heart development for the marketing infrastructure. Basic infrastructure will be from MG Narega, and marketing infrastructure will be from this. And we have given a guideline for management of these village hearts. I have created a guideline. We drafted it. And then we consulted some of the experts, and then I have given it to all the states to follow that. So maybe that when the infrastructure is being built up, then this guideline also will try to push them to this. We are now developing on the ENAM, the linkage factor, the e-platform linkage to the village heart. Probably after 1 year, we'll see that the village hearts will be linked in this, because they will be the center of retailing and as well as aggregation for the APMCs. Hub and spoke model will be there.
Wonderful.
That's
so coming to the second question, which is on the FPOs.
FPO. So FPO, you know, like today, there are three organizations mainly who, there are two main organizations who are driving the FPO. I mean, before my scheme has come into being. One is the NABARD, which has got about 4,300 odd FPOs they have created in India. And SFSC, it's about 910 FPOs. I mean, that's a number which I can tell you. Apart from this, some of the states like Tamil Nadu, they have done, created about 180 FPOs, and few here and there isolated. And some of the very few private companies, for like I think Reliance Retail and others, they have come up with their own few numbers. And some of the things like your Bill and Melinda Gates have also done some of the handholding. But beyond this, the main contribution has been by NABARD and this thing. You would believe that even if they are handled, there are FPOs which have come up their own. Sahyadri is one good case. You are talking about the exports. You'll find that they are in that export segment without any government support, and also doing the that F&B segment, even the export. They are very capable of doing it. And if you look at Maharashtra and Karnataka, already in the fruits and vegetable segments, there are the FPOs. Whereas if you move towards Punjab, they are basically in the grain segment. So that is a mix of these FPOs. But what we are looking at the FPO scheme, new scheme, I can now tell because I have just done it. So 10,000 FPOs, we are looking at FPOs which can be both in companies and as well as in the cooperative sector, state cooperative sectors, including mutually aided cooperative, which is basically where the interference is much less, and also the Part 9 of the company sector. So Companies Act. So in that case, we will be providing a kind of a professional agency called the cluster-based business organization, since all the entire industries there, entire India is there. I'm saying it because we'll be launching it very shortly, and it will be to the benefit of the industry. There are three kinds of formation and promotions we have actually focused on. One is government-led formation and promotion. The other is industry-led. Third is, of course, support to the existing FPO. Three categories I have created in that. The first is that the government support, where we'll be doing absolutely from baseline survey to aggregation to all their compliance issues, meetings, and their salary support of the COs, accountants, and all this, including even the establishment cost supports and even the registration cost support. Apart from that, there is a beautiful training program, skill building development with the national institutes. There will be time and there will be different training calendars for each of the FPOs, where there will be from the organizational management skills, to compliance skills, to marketing value chain, to even other aspects like companies that is being done. So all these will be given to each of these FPOs and to the national institute level institutes, which are very close to their state or something. And and then they'll be given an equity grant support up to 15 lakh for each FPO with a matching equity grant. This thing. And second is the credit guarantee, because the basic challenge which is there is what Samik Saab said is the collateral is the major challenge. So this credit guarantee facility up to 2 crore will be a kind of collateral free that we are looking at, because we looked at the survey result by the PricewaterhouseCoopers in Maharashtra about these FPOs, about 406 FPOs they had surveyed it. We realized this was one of the biggest challenge. So we have created that ecosystem of 1,500 crore credit guarantee fund. So where this credit guarantee will be given to up to 2 crore for each of the this thing.
Okay, yeah. So, Mrs. Gwen, if I may just come in, you are a wealth of information and knowledge. So there is no way that we can tap your brain in 10-minute questions. We'll have to spend much more time with you.
Thank you.
So we will come and see you, because we are also in Delhi and you are in Delhi. So once this COVID fear is lifted, then I would certainly want to come and meet you to share some of those things that we have also been doing. And of course, we are very grateful to you that you could make it, because as I said, it has really enriched the discussions. We are past 6 o'clock. So I think we will close the session here, because Shiv, there were some questions for you, but maybe I'll send them to you, because you had mentioned that you had another commitment after 6 o'clock.
We'll take it offline and
Yeah. So we are closing right now. And first of all, I'd like to thank all our eminent panelists for sharing their knowledge and enriching and contributing to the discussions. We would like to thank our participants who at one time came close to 300. And we would also like to announce that we would be preparing a summary of the discussions as a kind of a white paper. And we will be circulating that along with the report, the study report, to everyone. And we hope that we will be able to conduct some more such webinars as we go along. So thank you very much once again, all of you, for sparing your valuable time and sharing your knowledge so freely with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kashyap, and
Thank
thank you all of you. I thank all of you, each of you. You have enjoyed it, and I've taken some feedbacks. It was a great learning process, and I've taken the feedback from each of you, from Mr. Bijay Sahu, from Mr. Samik Das, even Shiv Kumar's, whatever I could hear, and even Mr. Saha. So it
Sir, I'll come and meet you. Sir, I'll come and meet you in Delhi after COVID.
It will be like we'll exchange also. I will exchange our mobile number. We'll be in touch.
Yes.
And Arvind Das was in touch with me very actively from Godrej Activate, and now I see you there in our website. It will be very nice. So it will be right. So we'll be in touch.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.